So now we're going to talk about muscle tissue. And so we have skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, and cardiac muscle. Key thing with muscle is all going to be about movement and motion. And so these are cells that actually have fibers in them called actin fibers and myosin. And these are both proteins in there. Actin is this long straight fiber that actually has these little barbs that come off. And myosin is a fiber that actually has a head on it that actually walks along the actin protein molecules there. And so by doing this, it actually causes contraction of the muscle, and the muscle shortens, and that actually allows for motion to take place. So we have skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, and cardiac muscle. And going into skeletal muscle is some of the largest cells in the body. These can actually be, some of these fibers in cells can be quite long. They're still only 10 to 30 microns in diameter, but some of these can be centimeters in length. They actually have, they're multinucleated, so they actually have hundreds of nuclei, and it's because of their length that they have to have all these extra nuclei in there to keep the normal activities of the cell going on. So they're multinucleated. Nucleuses are always peripheral. And when you look at these, like if on a typical microscope screen, if we put it up to 100 power, which magnifies it 1,000 times, which this is a kind of a cross section of, you're only going to get like maybe 5 or 6 muscle cells within the view of that screen. And they're all going to be heavily striated. So you're going to see these lines running back and forth. So it's really easy to tell when you're looking at skeletal muscle. They contain thousands of mitochondria in there because they're so metabolically active. They actually have collagen fibers that surround them and actually hold each one of these fibers together. And then there's actually at the end of those, at the end of each one of these muscle cells right here, there's collagen fibers that go off that will have actually run into eventually into tendons. This is underneath voluntary control. It's the only muscle that you can actually control with your thoughts, is skeletal muscle. So you can voluntarily move your arm, your leg, where these muscles are at. Smooth muscle, on the other hand, is much smaller. You can see in a high-powered field, instead of just like 7 of the skeletal muscles, you're going to see like 30 of these smooth muscle cells within a high-power field. They're not striated, and the reason why we have striation with skeletal muscles, all of these actin and myosin fibers are lined up perfectly parallel, and that's what gives us our striation. When we look inside a smooth muscle, they don't actually line up parallel. They actually crisscross each other, so we don't get striation. So very small cells, not striated. They have a central nucleus, so it's not peripheral, and they only have one nucleus per cell. And they are actually somewhat on automatic control, so the nervous system plays a little bit of a role in movement of smooth muscle, but a lot of times they can move themselves in a rhythmic fashion, like in your digestive system. It has these receptors in there that tells the smooth muscle when to do peristalsis in motion. They're underneath involuntary control, so you cannot consciously control your smooth muscle, and it is controlled by the autonomic nervous system, which is the unconscious part of your nervous system that does things that you don't have to think about. Places where we find these, so skeletal muscle, of course, is going to be in the musculoskeletal system. Smooth muscle is going to be inside of like your digestive system, the reproductive system. Cardiac muscle, this is only found in the heart and no place else. And the key thing is it's in the heart, so it's not inside of arteries and veins. That would actually be back up here to smooth muscle that's inside of those. But this is found inside of the heart. Bigger than smooth muscle, so you could probably get about 20 of these cells in a high-powered field compared to 30 smooth muscles. Not nearly as big as your skeletal is. These are striated. It's not as easily seen on the striation, so it's not quite as heavily striated as, say, skeletal muscle that you can see right away. But there's still definitely striations when you look at it. Smaller central nucleus inside of the cells. And then the interesting things is they have these places where the cells actually meet up and touch each other that make these dark lines called intercalated discs. Heart muscle actually will beat on its own. which is kind of a really cool and interesting and neat thing that it actually does. So you can actually put two cardiac muscle cells together that can be beating at different times, and when they join up underneath the microscope, they will actually all start beating at the same time together. So it is striated, and it is involuntary. So once again, you cannot control it with your conscious thoughts.